And we're live.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular council meeting for January the 11th, 2021. Happy New Year. It's our first council meeting of the new year. Obviously, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are still meeting virtually, but residents are able to observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast on the Town of Shelburne YouTube page, as well as archived videos of meetings in the past. So with that, I would ask that everybody join for the playing of the national anthem. Thank you. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Any member with a disclosure of pecuniary interest for this evening?
So Mayor Mills, I don't have a pecuniary interest, but this is more so for Jennifer. I just got a call from Linda, and she indicated that it says when she tries to log in that there's another meeting in progress, and so she's having difficulty logging in. So I don't know if you could reach out to her and hopefully clarify that. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. If anybody does have a pecuniary interest, those disclosures can be made verbally and in writing with the clerk. On to minutes from the December 14th Committee of Adjustment and regular council meeting. Can I get a mover and seconder to adopt those minutes? Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Hull. Is there any discussion on either set of minutes? All in favor? Carried. All right. Public question period. Jennifer, no questions submitted?
No, sir. No questions for this evening.
Just a reminder to members of the public, any questions that you would like to pose for question period can be submitted to the clerk by email or by phone until 12 o'clock noon on the Monday day of the meeting. There's no presentations or deputations, so that takes us right to council inquiries. The member of council have an inquiry for this evening? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Yes, and I'm glad to see that Steve is on. This is a follow-up, Steve, I think to our last meeting before the holidays regarding the allocations potentially for the senior development proposal. And I know that you had mentioned that there may have been some options that may be available for council to consider, and that they may come back to, or is likely to come to council by way of a report. And so I just wanted to find out, I mean, I'm not asking for answers today, I'm just talking about by way of a report. Is that something that will be coming this month?
Through you, your worship. I'm not sure exactly what the timing will be. So we have had a number of discussions with Flato and their engineers, Cole Engineering, and they've reached out regarding basically narrowing different options to see what analysis they should undertake. And so it was agreed that they should continue to review those options and prepare a memorandum for our review regarding those options. I know they're working on that. We haven't received it yet. So that's really just the uncertainty with respect to timing is when we might have that information and more information to report on that.
Okay. Does that and thank you for that. I guess from council's perspective, though, albeit that they may be needing to submit additional information for you to consider, does that preclude us from getting information as to what our options are? So regardless of what they come up with, certainly they're going to be looking for allocation. So are you saying that you're planning to wait until what they say before you come with a report, or can we get that information anyways?
We could certainly bring forward information for council to consider with respect to overall servicing capacity. The information that Cole would bring forward would be more about, what are the options to connect into the system. I suppose it does relate to capacity in some respect, in that there is a pumping station potentially involved, or in multiple options there may be, and the capacity of the station is a factor as well. But we, as I say, we haven't seen that. We could certainly, I believe Steve Burnett's team is going to work with us as well to try and have a general capacity update earlier this year. I'm not sure exactly what the timing will be for that, but I see, Steve's unmuted and he may be able to add to my comments.
Yeah, and I was just going to add through you, your worship, that we are trying to bring forward that allocation report early this year. Aqua is currently pulling the information that they can as of year end. To be fair, with so many people staying home under the pandemic, we're very interested in seeing how flows may have been affected through this year as it is. So our plan is, obviously we had to have to the end of December information, but our plan is hopefully to have that report in sort of early February back to council, just as long as we can get the information. I know the town's already collected the information on the metering, and so it's really just us working with Aqua and then bringing that more general allocation report forward, which, as Steve said, will be one of the items required in reviewing the Flato package and information. So we are moving forward to have that readily available this year based on a December year end for 2020.
Okay, perfect. So that's early February. And Mayor Mills, just one more unrelated to this. Oh, geez. If somebody else has a question, I forgot it. If not, then I'm sure it'll come to me. The old age is getting to me.
I have one quick update I can give.
Go ahead.
You can gather your thoughts. I was speaking with a few of the councillors before we started live streaming, but just for the sake of members of the public and members of the media who may be reporting similar sorts of information. As many of you will know, one of the things that I've been doing for the last several months is providing a daily COVID status report, which draws on information from Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health. And kind of the three metrics that are used in those daily reports are number of new cases, number of current cases, and number of hospitalizations. It was reported this morning, and I think Friday as well, that there were 0 hospitalizations within Dufferin County. But in doing a little bit of further digging, the information coming from Headwaters Healthcare Center in Orangeville indicated that they had 5 inpatients who were positive for COVID-19. So I wasn't quite sure how those two numbers would jive. So anyways, in asking some questions, what it turns out to be the case is that the public health numbers refer to residents within the public health unit. So when it says that there are 0 hospitalizations within Dufferin County, what that means is there are 0 Dufferin County residents who are currently hospitalized with COVID-19. It doesn't mean that there are 0 cases within our local hospitals. So a representative from the hospital did clarify that there are 5 cases right now at Headwaters. But none of those inpatients are residents from within Dufferin County. So I will try to find a way to clarify that in future reports so that it's a little bit clearer for those reading through it. The hospital, I think, is only releasing their information on a weekly basis on Fridays. So I'll maybe wait until my Friday updates to give that further information. But just when you're reading it, it's a little bit more context to consider. But do you need me to go on, Deputy Mayor?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Thanks for inviting me all that time. So, and I'm sure some, if not all of you guys may have gotten this inquiry from members of the public, and this is for Steve or staff. This is by way of inventory, I guess, as to what's available. I've been getting a number of questions from religious organizations as to what's available by way of land for them. So whether there's an opportunity in the industrial area or otherwise, I know that at some point between the two, you guys were going to come back, maybe you, Steve, with respect to there's certainly land that's available in the town, whether it's for commercial or otherwise, but specifically for this group or these groups, you know, I'm constantly getting these questions. Even up until like yesterday, I think I got a question with respect to that. Is there a way we could find out what is available, if anything, by way of opportunities?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We have had a number of inquiries with respect to places of worship, and we have responded to that. Just going off of memory, most of those inquiries we did indicate, you know, what the zoning requirements are, what zones would permit that type of use. It is fairly limiting in that the zones that permit a place of worship are basically limited to institutional zones and residential zones. So the only available or land that's undeveloped, specifically designated for institutional use and zoned for institutional use that I'm aware of is up on Highway 10, the Archdiocese property. And that's just surrounded by the Summerhill development. Whether it's available or not, I haven't seen any listings to indicate that it's for sale. And then the only other opportunity that I'm aware of is that potential opportunity is there's land, you know, obviously tied to the Centennial Highlands Elementary School. That's zoned institutional as well. Again, the school board has not listed anything for sale. It's a larger property than a school would normally reside on. Whether that may be available or not, you know, we haven't had discussions with either of those landowners to determine if there's opportunity there. And then just one final comment on the industrial park area. Under the Ministry of Environment land use compatibility guidelines, something like a place of worship would be classified as a sensitive land use. And so if you put it into an industrial area or near an industrial area, it really would constrain what types of uses could go on other properties in the industrial area. So we have been trying to steer those types of inquiries away from the industrial area just to maintain as much flexibility for industrial and a range of commercial type uses for that industrial park.
Councilor Donato.
Just a comment, the Archdiocese is going to be moving very closely in the near future, I think, with their land up there, and I don't believe it will be up for sale because they do have plans for it.
That's the parcel by Summerhill.
That's the parcel by Summerhill, yeah.
Okay, any other inquiries?
If I'm not sure, Your Worship, but I've been hearing a little bit about the sidewalks, and I'm just going to ask Jim if he can respond back. They are icy, and especially up in the area near the arena where I walk, driveways are completely icy, extremely hard to walk through that area. And I'm just wondering, maybe not getting the sand and salt out there to make it a little less dangerous.
Through Your Worship, just a quick update there. Over the holidays, we did have a few breakdowns of sidewalk equipment. So at one point we were down to our tractor with the blower on it. So we do have a couple of pieces of equipment out of circulation. But I will touch base with Public Works first thing tomorrow morning and just ask them if they can do a patrol on it first thing and make sure that it's in decent shape.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? No? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to reports. First report is from the town planner regarding the proposed street names for the Fieldgate subdivision. So Steve, do you want to walk us through this? I don't think there's anything altogether new in this, but.
No, and thank you, Mayor Mills. Just to quickly summarize, we received a application from Fieldgate for naming of the streets in their proposed subdivision on the east side of Shelburne. That evolved from the original application based on some council direction. So the original theme was centered around natural heritage and some of the findings of their studies for the property. As we know, there's a fairly large woodlot in the north end of the property. The Besley Drain flows through the west side of the property as well. And there's some wetland and some bedrock formations that are identified through those studies that they were essentially naming the streets after. And more recently, there was some council direction about naming streets in the town and specifically in the subdivision after Indigenous groups. And some specific names in particular were recommended from that. And Fieldgate was receptive to modifying their street names to incorporate those 4 names. They've included them in the subdivision street names. So the theme is modified a little bit, and I think it still works quite well in that there's a mix of Indigenous and natural heritage theming for the street names. There is one special request for one street, which Fieldgate is proposing to name Leanne Lane. I did get a little bit more information from Fieldgate about that. The architect for the homes in the subdivision, his name is Richard Vink, and his late wife, Leanne, they would like to name a street after her, kind of in memoriam or in honor of her. They also mentioned that Richard is a resident of the Shelburne area, so that doesn't have a direct influence with respect to the review under the street naming, but I wanted to mention both of those factors. All of the names, with exception to that special request, comply with the town street naming policy. So the use of a special request name as put forward by Fieldgate for Leanne Lane is not specifically contemplated by the policy. That's not to say that council can't permit it. It would just be a bit of an exception from the policy. In our report, we did note that the policy explicitly says that naming that could be construed as advertising is not permitted. So advertising on behalf of a business. And I don't believe, in my discussions with Fieldgate that there's any intent there, that this is truly in recognition of someone who's important to the company, who has passed on, and important to the architect of the homes. But I did want to note to council that more recently we have received a sign permit application from Leanne Homes Incorporated, which is a name that Fieldgate has incorporated as a company name as well as part of its home building division. Now, in speaking with Fieldgate, they indicated that all of the branding of the homes and the marketing of their homes in the subdivision will be under the broader banner of Fieldgate Homes. I don't see any, although Leanne is the same name, it's not like it's Leanne Homes Lane. So I don't see a lasting kind of advertising benefit to having Leanne Lane so named in the subdivision. But as I mentioned, it is a special request because it's not specifically contemplated by the policy. We did circulate the street names to a long list of agencies. In addition to that, the Deputy Mayor, I understand that you've been in contact with some of the First Nations, including an elder, as well as the Dufferin Cultural Resource Circle, and that they had put forward those Indigenous names which have been incorporated. So we did not receive any concerns or objections to the proposed street names. We did not hear back from a number of agencies in the circulation, but we did check for conflicts with the county street naming in terms of existing street names, and contacted other municipalities in the county about whether there's any potential conflicts with proposed street names in their municipalities. So no conflicts have been identified, so we're all clear from that perspective. Lastly, I've just noted that there is a marketing name now attached to the subdivision. So Fieldgate has started a website. There's not too much detail yet regarding the development, but they are referring to the development as Emerald Crossing. And also just with respect to the park name, that council had resolved on December 14th to name the park after William and Mary Gant, or at least to consider that name. Now there's lots of time to determine that, as the park development will be a little ways out before we can have an opportunity for officially naming the park and determining the facilities and the timing of the park development. So that's my report, and I'm happy to take any questions about the proposed street names. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Any questions for the planner? No? Okay. So the draft motion essentially is to receive the report and to approve the proposed street name list, which is included therein. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Wagner. Any discussion before I call the vote? All in favor? Carries. All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is a letter from Sandy Brown regarding his consent application for 221 Owen Sound Street. I believe the clerk had sort of given the Committee of Adjustment a heads up at our last meeting that this might be forthcoming. Jennifer, do you want to speak to this at all, or?
Mr. Brown had submitted this letter just prior to the Committee of Adjustment on December 14th. I had indicated that the letter would be brought forward to Council for this meeting, January 11th, and on recommendations from the town planner. The recommendation in the agenda is what is being requested.
Okay. So as I understand it, Mr. Brown essentially had to reapply for a severance because the original one that we granted had lapsed. And he's basically asking for a reduction in the normal fee. And the recommendation is that, essentially whatever money is left over at the end of the day, obviously will be returned to him. Is that pretty close summation? Okay.
Yes.
Any discussion on this? Councilor Bernardo?
I'm just curious, we've had lapses in the past where people have failed to, have we had return fees or done anything in the past? Like, are we setting a precedent by doing?
Jennifer?
Steve had his hand up.
Okay, oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Steve.
Yeah, and Jennifer may have something to add. I don't recall any requests to reduce fees before in conjunction with a lapsed consent. It does happen from time to time. I think this is maybe the second time in recent years anyway. I will note that for this particular application, there was consent and rezoning the first time around. The application fees are structured in a way that there's a base fee, which is non-refundable. And then there are contingencies, which if not used to pay the cost of processing the application can be returned. What we've done for Mr. Brown in this case is that we discounted the new application fee by the amount that could be returned to him from the previous applications, as his contingencies under the old applications were not used. So our concern with reducing the fee by a prescribed amount as requested is that we don't know what the total cost will be, and we've already returned contingencies from the old applications. So the recommendation is basically, if there is something, the town very carefully tracks the costs of processing each application. If there is something left over after final approvals have been given and the consent is registered, then that amount would be the amount that could be returned. Based on accounting of costs to date, we do know it would be for sure less than $1,000, but the exact amount we're not sure. So it'd be a matter of a few hundred. And to your point, it does, if the town allows us once, it does potentially open the door to others making a similar request. If there was a solution to this, it would be, I guess that nobody ever allows their consent to lapse, but if it happens again, we could have a reapplication fee through the fee bylaw through the next update, which should be somewhat reduced to account for kind of the duplication of having to go through the process twice.
Okay.
I mean, I can certainly understand Mr. Brown's point, but on the other hand, I mean, I want to make sure that we're not shortchanging ourselves, because it certainly wouldn't be fair to pass additional costs on to the rest of the taxpayers in the town. So I do think that what's being recommended is kind of an equitable way of dealing with this. We'll closely track the costs and whatever's left and isn't actually paid out in disbursements or to cover our own fees will be returned to them. So does anybody have any issues with that? No? Okay, can I get a motion then to receive the letter from Mr. Brown and to resolve that any funds remaining will be returned to him at the end of the process after final approval to ensure that all costs are fully covered and accounted for? Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. All right. Okay. Is that it for you, Steve?
I believe so. Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, next up is a report from the CAO regarding weekend expansion of the Grey County Transit Project. Denise, take it away.
Thank you. Through the mayor, the report addresses a request of council in the past to look at enhancing the Grey County Transit System project through the expansion of the service to the weekends. This report outlines that it is possible, and we've confirmed with Grey County staff and their operator that there certainly can be the implementation of weekend service, meaning Saturday and Sunday, extended from Southgate and Dundalk and Southgate to Orangeville. The cost would be approximately $60,000 per year. There is the opportunity to create that program on a month-by-month basis. So in order to facilitate the funding of this, we've looked at the 2021 budget, which included two areas of costs. One was for 2 transit shelters at approximately $25,000, and the other was the $8,000 related seasonal maintenance for those shelters. I've attached the information from Grey County in their budget presentation. This original service was launched with the funding that was provided to Grey County, as well as Southgate Township, for a combination amount of approximately $2.3 million. The route that was supported through the grant that the Township of Southgate had completed was to have bus service run from Dundalk in particular into Orangeville. And their grant was approximately $500,000. The use of transit was important as part of their project to support access to GO, leaving Orangeville for employment purposes. So the ridership has been building month by month. It still, I think, has significant room for improvement and expansion. However, the capacity in the buses is limited currently due to COVID-19. So the report recommends the realignment of the 2021 budget items based on an approximately 5-month pilot project for weekend service, Saturday and Sunday, based on the 2 routes that are 2 stops that are currently in Shelburne. We will review a staff with Grey County and the operator on what times would be best. They certainly won't be as early as they are weekday because there'll be a different potential client base. Additionally, GO does not run on Saturdays or Sundays leaving Orangeville. Additionally, there is no Orangeville transit service on Sunday, so we need to assess and work around those two issues. As well, the other challenge we're facing right now, assuming council would like us to proceed, would be implementation. With the current restrictions under lockdown, and that potentially there'll be even greater restrictions pending what the province announces, many of the locations, in particular the 2 stops that are currently in Orangeville as the destination, wouldn't really provide much opportunity for anybody to use services within those areas because they're currently closed. So we would then have to assess when to implement based on lockdown being discontinued, and most likely could mobilize that within 10 to 14 days of that announcement. So other than that, there's really not much more in the report. I did mention that the alignment of the money, or the realignment, is based on the fact that, as we all know, 2021 is turning out to be already very challenging. We anticipate that our fiscal challenges will increase, and eliminating other costs or projects at this time to fund about $25,000 is just not something as staff or myself we feel is strategic, and thought that this would actually be the most effective way to achieve weekend service as soon as possible. So that in a nutshell is the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Denise. Just one comment that I'll make before I open it up. First of all, I mean, I'm supportive of the recommendations, excuse me, that Denise is making to realign the money that we've already budgeted for some other things to first just, establish a 7-day-a-week transit program. But I do agree with your sort of last comments there about the current lockdown. I mean, if this is going to be a 5-month trial program, it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense that we start paying for a service that really, people aren't going to be able to use, at least, not in the fullness of what is possible to provide. So my thought would be that, if we agree in principle that this is the way we want to go, but hold off in terms of actually implementing it until the lockdown is over, then we're not eating into that 5-month trial period with a period of time where people aren't actually able to make use of the service we're providing. So with that, I will open it up to the floor for any additional comments. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you. First and foremost, Denise, I thought the report was excellent, and I think the suggestions make total sense. I think certainly bus shelters could wait if we're looking to expand the weekend service, which a lot of people said they were looking for. So thank you very much for that. And I also thank you for mentioning when we should be considering the implementation, so that we're not eating into those 5 months and wasting that unnecessarily. I also want to thank you and your team for, you would have noted, everybody, that I sent an email to Denise asking her about the implementation of the marketing. She responded back with very detailed information. So I want to thank her and her team for getting that out and executing that. And I'm sure that when the 5-month is implemented, that same marketing strategy will be in place. My only question after those comments, Denise, would be, whenever we do implement the 5 months, and let's assume, and I do believe that it will be successful, and that money is obviously being used for the money that was used for the bus shelter, where would the rest of the funds, let's say if we're going to be funding it for the rest of the year, where would that money come from?
That's a good question. So I think if we're halfway through the year, and what we plan to do with Grey County is on a 5-month plan, we plan to do a check-in at the 2-month mark to determine what the ridership is on the weekend, to reassess the continuation. If it's very successful, I did mention that the annual cost is $60,000, recognizing we won't have a full year. We would come back to you as council to look at how continuing the service for a period past 5 months could be funded. And also at some point, maybe look at whether there's any grants that we could apply for to support this. Obviously, the ridership money is not even covering the cost of operating that Grey County is incurring. So, and then potentially if there's any more COVID-19 funding, whether or not transit, as it is in many other communities, potentially would be supported. But yeah, we would check in. And if we had flexibility, we would identify similar to this, if there's realignment opportunities, or whether you would like us to find other monies to support it by. So I would anticipate if we start this in March or April, which is probably the most realistic, we're going to get a significant amount of the year in with the 5-month service.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on that? No? Okay. So the motion as it reads essentially is to receive the CAO's report and to reallocate the $25,000 that had been approved for transit shelters to launch the 5-month pilot project of weekend service, and further to realign the $8,000 that had been allocated for winter maintenance of the transit shelters to go to the promotions and advertising of the transit system, including the weekend additional coverage. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Wagner. Any additional discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Okay. Thanks, Denise. Next up is Carrie to talk about our annual borrowing bylaw.
Thank you. And through the mayor, this is the annual bylaw that we pass at the beginning of every year. It doesn't actually mean that we are intending to borrow anywhere near that amount of money. It's just set up so that should something happen throughout the year, we already have a borrowing bylaw established. And this allows us to borrow should the need arise. I'm not anticipating that being the case, but it is a requirement under the Municipal Act that we pass such a bylaw annually.
Okay. All right, thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder for that bylaw then? Councillor Bernardo, second by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. All right, Carrie, you're up again. Connecting Link contract award, which is good news.
Yes, so I have Jim and Steve Burnett here to help me with this one. I will just briefly outline, hold on, to briefly outline the how we got to this point. Council is aware that we were successful in obtaining the Connecting Link grant for the Main Street East portion, and the RFP process began late November, and the RFP closed on December the 3rd. 4 bids were received out of 15 contractors contacted, and I think I'll turn it over to Steve Burnett so that he can go through the way the RFP was laid out with the different choices and options for council's consideration tonight, and then we can go back to the staff recommendation.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Carrie, and thank you for that introduction. So just to explain for council, the funding application when it went in, obviously didn't have all of the details determined as to which portions of the road or sidewalk, curbing, etc., might need to be replaced. So once the detailed work was completed, it was determined that in the core area on Main Street, the curving there does need to be replaced along with some of the road improvements. And where that curving it has interlocking block behind the curb, basically between the back of the curb and the sidewalk. For anyone that's walked downtown knows that area. So as part of that, and as part of the base contract, because that wasn't originally included in the funding agreement, we included only a 1 foot wide replacement of that curving behind, that interlocking block behind the curb. That's not the best ideal. The ideal would be to replace that interlocking block. It is a tripping hazard. I believe the reports do bring forward how it has been brought forward in previous council budgets to replace it. So we went through the process and got a provisional pricing for that. The provisional pricing was twofold. Option one was if we actually replace that interlocking block with new block. So remove the old, salvage the old, and Public Works would retain that block so it could be used elsewhere, and put a new interlocking block to basically improve the health and safety situation, as well as revitalize that downtown area. Second option was to reuse that same block and put it back in again. That would mean power washing it, etc. Put the block back in. You'd have some areas where the block has been cut, so there was some expense that way, and actually the pricing was fairly close between those two items. Both of those items were included and as options. So you'll see in our report, we then basically, and maybe we should have used a different word other than option, because we then said we could either go with option one, which was to install that new block as it was in the contract. Option two, to reset the existing block. Or option three, just do the curving only, which wouldn't be using either of those options that came forward. And then, of course, there was option four, which was no provisional items, because the other provisional item, just for council's awareness, is that the curbing just outside of Town Hall, where there's the delineators that have been put in to ensure that no one can pass somebody coming up to the crosswalk. We've actually proposed to extend that sidewalk out and remove that lane. And I think that has two benefits to it. It opens up the opportunity for different things that can happen in front of Town Hall, but it also removes that safety issue of cars trying to skirt around other cars in that area. So I guess at this point, I can maybe turn it back to Carrie, but ultimately our recommendation was originally if we could go with option one and replace that block, that would be ideal, but it is over budget based on the numbers. So secondary to that would be to fall back and just do the curbing only, but we do see a lot of merit from an engineering perspective of proceeding with that replacement of the interlocking block. But maybe I'll turn it back to you now at that point, Carrie.
Sure. So under the financial impacts, staff had a look at our existing reserves, and we are recommending that should council choose to do the option one, that the additional 82,000 and change come from our existing road construction reserve. It would still leave us a balance at the end of the year of 293,500 in that reserve if we were to go ahead with this recommendation.
So that still does require approval from the ministry, though, to approve those provisional items?
Yeah, so through to you, your worship, we have already reached out to the ministry for both items because it was not specifically worded in the MTO agreement for that piece. It does make sense, no different than you'll see in other areas where we will remove the curb. We will have to replace the topsoil and the seed and everything back pretty much to the sidewalk in order to be able to do that work. So we do see a relatively low risk of MTO not approving that, but at the same time, it's currently not in the agreement. We want to make sure that the town is protected and covered for that. Similarly, on the other provisional item, changing that curb is 100% a approval by MTO. So we are going through that process now and why we made that provisional. So I guess the way the resolution is written is really asking for council's permission that if that is approved, that we would be able to move forward with option one. I guess the only other thing that we're saying is that we would want, and we've noted the recommended contractor as well, However, we would hold awarding to them until we did have that confirmation back from MTO as well.
Anything else, Carrie?
Well, actually, there is one more thing that I did mention in the report. We have already applied for the connecting link intake number 6, which would cover the Owen Sound Street portion. And should we be successful in obtaining that grant, we would also look at replacing the interlocking stone on that section of the road as well.
Okay. All right, any questions for Carrie or Steve? Councilor Donato?
I guess I always got the not so bright questions, but why, if we knew we had to do the work in that area, replace the interlock and, you know, potentially replace the interlock, why would we have not put that in the original proposal to the MTO? And I guess I'm asking, knowing that we're doing the intake for Owen Sound, have we put the interlock part that we may have to replace into MTO so they know that that's going to be happening?
I can maybe field this one. The difficulty with the application is it is a fairly generic application. So it was more about the replacement of the roadway. It wasn't until we got into detailed design, Walter, that it was actually determined that the curbing was in very bad shape in that area. The original intent of the entire application was actually only to be a shave and pave or a grinding similar to what happened on the west side of 89, but with further analysis and also I think some ingenuity with the design where funds were actually utilized in places where there was some bad breakup of the curbs and areas that were causing issues is where that came up. So I think the second application's been a little more open. I don't know that it's been specifically noted, but as you said, we don't see this being an issue because no different than replacing curbs on other areas, you do still have to replace what's behind those curbs. We just wanted to make sure, because of the first time being awarded through this project, that we didn't get eliminated from any of that work to be done.
All right, anybody else? Okay, if not, can I get a mover and seconder for the motion then in the agenda? Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. Any additional discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
You too. Take care. Okay, so next up is a notice of motion from the Deputy Mayor from the last meeting. The motion reads, be it resolved that in the spirit of the recommendations made by the Shelburne Anti-Racism Task Force, the council approves the creation of a diversity and inclusion committee, and that a staff report be brought back to council with the terms of reference and mandate inclusive of 8 to 10 members from the community and 2 to 3 members of council at the next scheduled meeting for approval. Can I get a seconder for that motion? Councillor Buffett. Deputy Mayor Anderson, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you. The only comment I'll make is if people were wondering why in the notice of motion, as it references the 8 to 10 members of the community and 2 to 3 members of council, that is the I guess I'll say template that was used by the County of Dufferin when they went to the community. I believe it was in that range by way of members. And the fact that we have 3 councillors or county councillors that sit along with the community members to guide those discussions. So that's where I got that from. This would be an open call to the community where the community would submit, I guess, applications. Maybe that's something that we could discuss, but that's what I had in my mind. That's what the county had done, just to make sure that everybody's given equal opportunity to participate. So again, that's the reason why you see what you see there. I was trying to mirror what the County of Dufferin had done.
Okay. Councillor Buffett, as seconder, do you want to speak to it? You're muted.
I'm having a problem. No, I think Steve has covered pretty well everything that I wanted to see.
Any questions or comments? Just for staff, so the motion indicates the terms of reference would be available at the next scheduled meeting. Is that doable? Denise?
It'll be a brief report. It may not comprehensive, because for us to have that report done, we're getting it done by next Wednesday. So certainly we can use only Dufferin County, but the town of Orangeville also has a committee. So there's certainly a number of great resources that we can replicate. What we will be doing, and I know Jennifer's, I'm going to be coming back with the report as well. So both of us will have reports that night in follow up to the task force. We'll be making sure in this case that staff liaisons will be dedicated to this new committee.
Perfect. All right. If there's no additional commentary, I'll call the question. Then all in favor? It's carried. All right. Okay, so the last item for consideration are the 2 Community Excellence Award nominations, which were included in the package, one for Mike Mackley and one for Yeehaw Solomon. Can I get a mover and seconder for the motion approving those 2 nominations? Deputy Mayor Anderson, do you want to get on there? You made both nominations.
Sure, I'll get on there.
And seconder, I saw Councillor Wagner's hand first. All right, any discussion on those? All in favor? Carried. So Jennifer, just a question on these. I mean, we've done a few since we've been meeting remotely. What's the plan going forward? Are we just going to kind of hold off until we can reconvene in person and kind of have everybody come in at one time and make the formal presentations to them, or?
Through your worship, the intention was to do a virtual presentation, not knowing when we'll be able to hold an in-person meeting. There's 2 Councillor Wagner nominated prior to the end of the year for 2020. So I'm hoping we can gather them all at one meeting virtually, just do a virtual presentation, and then from there we'll deliver the award and the certificate to them directly to them.
Okay, perfect. All right, Councillor motions. Are there any notices of motion for this evening? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
So this is not actually a notice of motion, so I apologize. I should have asked this in the council inquiry. This is for Denise. You had sent an email with those pictures of the protest that was going on in front of Town Hall. What ended up happening regarding that? And hopefully there were no security concerns. I did see the series of photos, but any further updates, concerns, issues regarding that?
Through the mayor, no. It was a fairly low participant number. There were no issues. It was, as we advised, a group that did not support or believe that the COVID-19 existed and had expressed their opinions regarding the wearing of masks.
Probably should have directed them to Wade's post. Videos. That's okay.
So yeah, it was a small group. We just wanted council to be aware in case there were questions, and had it been a larger participant number, but it was very small, and the group was very respectful and didn't create any issues regarding use of the sidewalk or the noise levels.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Last call for notices of motion then. Okay. On to communications. There are 13 items listed. I spoke with Councillor Wagner earlier about one of them, so I think she wants to pull one out. Is there anything else that anybody wants to discuss from that list? Oh, okay. Councillor Wagner, I think it was number 6 you wanted to.
Yes, I do believe, I don't have my information in front of me, unfortunately, but yes, it was the letter in support of small businesses from, I believe it was Kingsville.
Yeah.
So just sort of want to discuss, I know that we had briefly, discussed about what we could potentially do moving forward in order to show, our community and especially our small local businesses that, we are hearing them and, we're not sitting idly by and, not advocating for them. So, if there's something we can do moving forward to just let them know that we are standing with them and we know that they are struggling and, provide them with some help or some knowledge or something.
So just to that point, I did have a chat with Councillor Wagner today, but I can share it with the rest of the group. I had a conversation with MPP Sylvia Jones last Thursday, I believe it was, to discuss a few things, but we did chat about this specifically. And based on the Premier's press conference on Friday, and news from the last couple of days, I don't think it's unreasonable at this point to assume that we'll likely hear probably as soon as tomorrow that there will be further restrictions put in place based upon the new modeling data that the province has in hand. So with that in mind, I mean, Councillor Wagner and I talked today, sort of at a point in time when the province seems to be indicating that they're going to be increasing the number of restrictions. It probably is not going to be that productive to at the same time ask them to consider rolling back some restrictions. But one of the things that I did discuss with Sylvia were supports that are being put in place by both levels of government, upper tier government, for small businesses. And Sylvia's offered to jointly host a town hall meeting with myself for our small business community to talk about some of those supports, and also be available just, to have a discussion with our small business community about the impacts that they're experiencing. So I think our staff had reached out to Sylvia's today, and Denise, is it January 20th as the tentative date?
All right. Yes, through your worship. Yes. Right now, Wednesday, January the 20th is the tentative. We're waiting for confirmation if that works for the MPP, and if that doesn't, her office will suggest some alternatives. We will organize it through the town. Carol Maitland, as our economic development officer, will be the lead on that. We will register all participants through Zoom so that it will be an hour to an hour and a half town hall, as the mayor has referenced.
So Sylvia did mention that she's done a similar town hall sort of format for the town of Caledon and had some pretty good response to that. So we'll give that a shot, hopefully on the 20th or very shortly thereafter. So once we're able to set that date more affirmatively, I guess we'll send out notice to council as well. And if you guys can share that with your contacts to make sure we have as many of our local small businesses sign on as possible so that they can find out, directly what financial supports are out there for them. It's certainly a difficult time, but the indications are that the modeling data that the province has before them is just not showing that the trends are going in the direction we need them to. So they seem to be indicating that they are going to be implementing tighter restrictions, at least in the near term, to try to get that under control. So I think, as long as we can try to get as much information out to our business community as possible, when it comes to the resources available, then that's at least something that they can, rely upon in the short term until we can ride the storm out. And any other thoughts or ideas on this?
I just wanted to add to your comments. First of all, I think having the forum is a great idea because it appears, that there are these resources, and whether this is accurate or not, I guess the town hall, sorry, will answer those questions, but that there are government resources, but it appears that maybe people are not aware of them and taking advantage of them. And so maybe it has to do with communication. So I think the forum that you spoke about, Mayor Mills, will be good in making sure that people are aware of the resources that are available.
Councillor Wagner, do you want to?
Yeah, I think Steve's right in that aspect. I think that there might be a lack of communication with, our government and our small businesses to know what is out there to help them. I think speaking sort of, without my council hat on and as a small business owner myself, there's also a fear from, small business owners accepting this help and then being asked to pay it back later. So, I think that it might help, small businesses to be able to ask these very crucial questions and, maybe feel a little bit safer in accepting the help and knowing that it's not going to be a requirement to pay it back at a later date.
Okay. Anybody else on that particular item? Okay, so stay tuned then for a date, but sounds like we're sort of moving towards the 20th. Any other item from the communications list that anybody wants to speak to separately? No, okay. Can I get a motion then to receive those items listed under communications? Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. All right, no closed session. I'm going to mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Donato, second by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Buffett, second by Deputy Mayor Anderson. All in favor? It's carried. All right. Well, that's not bad for the first meeting of the year.